2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
James Bolen of Cable is the Republican candidate in the 25th Senate District. James, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Your campaign website says more than 30 years of Democrats representing this Senate seat, Northwest Wisconsin, is enough. What's been the downside of more than 30 years of Democrats?
You know, I think it's important that we look at the district and its needs and what's going on, and it just seems that, you know, for the last 30 years, businesses have struggled, and they feel like, as I'm out in the district talking to people, you know, they feel like Madison doesn't necessarily understand how life is different in northern Wisconsin. And so, you know, for me, I look at it and say it's time that we make sure that Madison understands, you know, how life is different up here in northern Wisconsin.
Another thing you highlight on your website is the epidemic, I'm going to use that term, of methamphetamine abuse in north. What are your in northern Wisconsin? What are your ideas on next steps to take to address that?
You know, I think the drug epidemic is very significant. As I travel around talking to the sheriffs, you know, law enforcement, school people and stuff. So I think it's really important that we work decisively on it. I think we need to have tougher penalties for people who are selling drugs. You know, I think we definitely want to send a strong message there that we're not going to tolerate people profiting from this epidemic. And we need to stop the sale of drugs. I think in regards to people who are addicted to these drugs, I think we need to work with compassion. I think it's really important that we understand, you know, how addicting these drugs are and the challenges that these people make, and we make sure that we give them the tools and resources that they need to combat this disease. And then I think it's important that we work on education prevention and making sure that people who haven't already tried these drugs never do.
Which gets us into the issue of health care. What are your thoughts on how we can preserve and maybe expand health care in rural Wisconsin?
You know, it's really important. I mean, up here in northern Wisconsin, as I'm talking to people, you know, my neighbors out on doors and stuff, affordable health care is one of the biggest issues that they're looking at. I think there's a couple of things. There's a great program right now that encourages young professionals to live and work in rural areas. And I think we should, you know, continue to work on that program, expand that program if possible. You know, another new technology that I'm excited about is telemedicine. It certainly opens up the ability for specialists to be seen in rural areas and to lower some of the costs, make it easier for people to see doctors in particular. So telemedicine is another area that I think has the potential to help lower costs in a rural area.
Are you hearing from hospitals and other medical professionals that Wisconsin's Medicaid reimbursement rates are too low and that we may be at a tipping point in terms of continuing to provide quality care through our Medicaid program? Tipping point, is that a fair term?
You know, I'm not sure, you know, if it's a tipping point. I do know that, you know, the last state budget increased those by about 4% in the total budget. That's a good start, but I think we certainly need to do more. I think it's important that we make sure that our healthcare providers have the resources that they need to continue to provide the care, especially here in rural northern Wisconsin. So I think it's definitely something that we need to take a look at.
Have you followed the pilot program between state government and Delta Dental that provides dental care to some low-income residents in some pilot programs? Is that an issue that you're aware of at all?
You know, when I'm out on doors and talking to people, nobody has brought that up,
Okay.
And so it's not something that I'm really hearing out on doors.
What about the issue of caregivers? AARP estimates that 578,000 Wisconsin residents care for a family member, a neighbor, a loved one. Would you support laws or rules that require hospitals to recognize and work with family caregivers when a loved one is hospitalized?
Especially when we're dealing with a loved one. You know, about 6 years ago, my wife's grandmother was at a point where she needed to be cared for. She really did not want to go into a nursing home, but the family just wasn't in a position to be able to afford, you know, to provide full-time health care for her. We actually pulled up our roots and moved our family from our home into her home to be able to continue to give her the care and need that she wanted. She wanted to stay in her home. She now, eventually progressed to the point where we just could not provide the level of care that she needs. She's in a home now. But it's something that definitely resonates very personally with me because our family just went through that. And I think it's important that we recognize the role that families play in caring for their family members as they age, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to give those families the resources that they need.
As a chamber director, you work closely with local governments. Local governments have been living with levy limits for about 14, 15 years. Some local officials say it hurts their ability to provide local services, but they control property taxes. Should we keep levy limits, dial them back, loosen them, or get rid of them?
I think it's really important that we hold the line on property taxes, especially in the 25th district. We have an aging population. Many of those people are on a fixed income, and so raising their property taxes could put them in a situation where they're choosing between paying their property taxes or paying for their prescriptions. So I think it's really important that we hold the line on property taxes. At the same time, the system does allow for some flexibilities with levy limits, and I think if there's a municipality that is struggling, I certainly would work with them and look at those flexibilities and see if there isn't something that we could do.
You need good highways in northwest Wisconsin to get your tourists up here and for your businesses to thrive. Yet there's an impasse in the capital over how we pay for highways in the future. How would you solve it? How would you like to see it solved?
I think it's important that we look at efficiencies and make sure that government is running as efficiently as it can. I think that's really important. As a government, we are using taxpayer dollars, and I think it's important that we make sure that we're being as efficient and responsible with those dollars as we possibly can, and just be as efficient as we can.
Are you not yet ready to raise the gas tax, or what you and I pay to register our vehicles, or what about tolling?
Especially in northern Wisconsin, we travel farther to get to appointments, to get to school, and things like that. So increasing the gasoline tax would affect our district disproportionately. I'm more focused on making sure that we are as efficient as possible, and that we also make sure that the revenue sources that currently exist, that our fair share of that is coming back up to northern Wisconsin.
The tax breaks and tax benefits that were given Foxconn is one reason that Kimberly-Clark wants essentially the same. When should state government help out private businesses?
For many years now, I've served on the board of the Bayfield County Economic Development Corporation, and we work every day on trying to bring businesses into the district. I think it's really important when you're trying to bring new businesses in, convince business owners to invest or expand in your area, that you give them the confidence in the relationship that you're going to have with them going forward. Because it's really about giving them confidence. Sometimes that comes in the form of incentive packages, but there are also other things that you can do to bolster that relationship. It's really about confidence building and relationship building. And so, each circumstance, what I have found at the Economic Development Board in Bayfield is that each circumstance is kind of unique.
The legislative leaders are just called a special session for the Senate to potentially vote on the Kimberly-Clark tax packages in November. Do you have a position on whether that Kimberly-Clark tax breaks is a good thing, how you would have voted on February 22nd if you would have been a member of the Assembly?
Really, my focus has been on the people of the 25th District. I have been out knocking on doors, talking to my neighbors, and the Kimberly-Clark deal is not something that is in their district or something that they seem to care about. I don't really have the particulars about what has been discussed in the hearings in those meetings and stuff, and so I can't really say definitively, what my thoughts on Kimberly-Clark at this time are.
The current state budget included about $600 million more in state aid for K-12. Some local education superintendents and leaders say thanks a lot, but we need another big bump in the next budget. How well funded are Wisconsin's public schools?
I think the $600 million was historic. It was, a great investment in our schools. There were other things that they did that are outside of that number as well. For example, sparsity aid was increased. They did some work with low-income schools. They did some work with safety grants and things like that. So my approach going forward would be, let's look at where we're at in the new budget, and let's look at where education is at and where the needs are, and make sure that we put the funding where the needs are. The
school choice voucher program has expanded from Milwaukee to Racine, now statewide. I don't know how many private schools in 25th District participate in it, but should we keep choice where it is, or what about the future of choice vouchers?
You know, there are a couple of schools in the district that participate in the choice program. I think it's important that we give parents the ability to choose and the flexibility to decide what's best for them and their families.
Your website also talks about mineral resources being part of the assets of the 25th Senate District. Do you think mining could be a potential source of economic development and jobs in the district's future?
You know, I think the legislation that was passed last year was an economic development package for northern Wisconsin. But instead of requiring an investment like we're talking about previously, it simply required government to give sensible timelines and reasonable guidelines to those who were looking to invest in northern Wisconsin. I think mining jobs can be good family-sustaining jobs, and I think that particular legislation struck a good balance between economic development and environmental protection.
Are you hearing reports that other mining companies might be interested in going back at some of the mineral resources in northwest Wisconsin?
I am not aware of any at this time, no.
Okay. There's a big debate in the next budget over whether we need a new prison. The prisons in Waupun and Green Bay were built in the 1800s. Some Democratic candidates for governor said we could potentially cut our prison population by half. Do we need a new state prison?
There's a lot of factors that go into deciding whether we need a new prison. There's, you know, feasibility studies, where that prison would be located, a lot of information that we just don't have at this time. So I can't really say, you know, that we need a new prison or not. That's something I would want to, you know, study further. But I would say that I am encouraged by the treatment and alternative diversion programs that we're seeing being utilized, because it's addressing the underlying needs of some of these nonviolent offenders and the reasons why they're finding themselves in a situation where they're needing to be incarcerated. And so I think, again, working with compassion and trying to address the underlying needs of you know, some of the people that are within the criminal justice system, and addressing those are certainly another area that I think we need to take some attention and look at.
25th District, of course, includes UW-Superior, which means it's part of the debate over the tuition freeze. We've frozen resident undergraduate tuition for 6 years. Should we freeze it for a 7th and 8th year?
I think we should. I think it's really important. As I talk to the people in my district, the affordability of a degree is something that is certainly important to them, and it just gives some reasonable cost controls.
You're in the tourism business. How well is the tourism business doing in the 25th District? Is it on an upcycle or a down cycle?
We know the 25th District geographically is the largest district in the state. And
it's bigger than 1 or 2 states. Excuse me.
Yeah, it is. So it runs from Superior down to south of Rice Lake, and from Hurley to south of Phillips. And so there's a lot of diversity there. I can say that in the cable area, where I've been the director for the last 12 years, we had 14 new businesses open their doors just this last spring. Mm-hmm. We have a gentleman who's building a $1.5 million bar restaurant right on the main intersection of town. We've seen room tax revenue go up. We've seen our visitor counts go up. I serve on the Governor's Council on Tourism, and so I talk with the other tourism directors from around the area, and all in all, they've been indicating that we've seen a really good boost in tourism over the last several years. But I think it's also important that we understand that we need to invest in our tourism budget as well. Minnesota has about a $29 million budget. Illinois' is about $59 million, and Michigan's is $38 million. Wisconsin's is about $15 million. So I think it's important that we make sure that we have the tools to continue to see the improvements that we've seen in the last several years.
Another key part of Northwest Wisconsin's economy is logging. How's logging doing generally?
You know, logging is one where in the last couple of years we've seen some legislation, both federal and state, to open up more markets, more logging opportunities. When I talk to people in the wood industry, they're indicating that that's a really good start, but they're also hoping that we're going to continue to open up those revenue streams. It's having an impact, but we need to do more.
The bills in the legislature that will legalize both recreational and medical marijuana, your positions?
Well, you know, I'm open to having a discussion about medical marijuana in the state of Wisconsin. I think that, you know, I would want to see more about the proposal, but I would certainly want to see it in a physician's-patient type of relationship, and I think it should be regulated like any other prescription would be. I'm not there on medical marijuana. I think especially when we talk about the drug epidemic that we're facing, legalizing
just
another
to clarify,
drug.
you said medical. You're not there on recreational.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
that.
not there on the recreational marijuana because we're dealing with a drug epidemic currently. So I'm not really looking to legalize another drug.
Do you want to highlight differences between you and the Democratic incumbent you're challenging on November 6th?
You know, what I would like to say is, 12 years ago when I was elected as the director of the Chamber of Commerce, it wasn't a position that I sought. I didn't apply for the job. The board reached out to me. I had served on the board for 6 years and I had been off for a couple of years, and they reached out to me and said, we need someone to come in and kind of restructure the chamber and lead a search for a director, which I did for them. After we concluded the interviews, they came to me and said, "You're a stronger candidate than anyone that we interviewed. Would you take the job?" And so reluctantly I did. It's been an amazing 12 years. We've done some incredible things. We've hosted, Paralympic World Championships. We work closely with a lot of big events. I've been able to help businesses work on best practices and how to expand, how to better themselves. Last fall, I was speaking at the Governor's Northern Economic Summit and was approached by a group of people from within the district who said they felt like Wisconsin needed a stronger voice in Madison. I agreed and said that I would help them try to find the person to be that voice. And as I went around looking for that person, everyone I was talking to kept saying, it should be you. You're the perfect person to be doing that. We think you would be, the strong candidate. And that's actually what led me to be here with you today.
Well, as a director of cable, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, how's Berkey doing?
I'm the chief of the Berkey Start, and so I volunteer. This will be my 25th year volunteering with the Berkey. I work very closely with the Berkey Foundation, and the last several years have been an incredible boom for them. They have raised numerous dollars. We bought a new start area that I oversee every year. We've also expanded into youth development, and so we're partnering with the State High School Nordic Championships are in cable every single year. That's a partnership between the Chamber and the Berkey. I actually announced the Lumberjack World Championships just a couple months ago, which is also a partnership between the Chamber and the Berkey. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. Obviously the new International Bridge. They are building a giant Nordic Center on Double O. And so the future is looking very bright for the Berkey, which is really good for our economy.
Berkey's back, huh?
Berkey's back.
James Bolen of Cable is the Republican candidate in the 25th Senate District. The election is November 6th. James, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.